If we're done talking about dirt, I'd like to start on number 11, please. I'm hoping that you already know this, but can anybody break down homicide into the two root words? What?
Homo meaning man and side meaning kill.
That's right. So patricide means killing a father, that's right. Pesticide is a chemical which kills a pest. Fungicide is a chemical which kills a fungus. And herbicide is a chemical which kills other plants. So for number 11, we've had like 4 generations of pest management. Bugs have been eating plants since time immemorial. And back in the day, the first thing that we ever figured out that could kill bugs, please look up, was the rocks that are poisonous. Somebody noticed that if you dig up a chunk of arsenic and you lick that, you die. So people thought, well, let's just grind up that rock and sprinkle it on the broccoli, and look at that, the bugs are dying. Does everybody realize the obvious problem with putting arsenic on your broccoli? Right. And so, round 1 of pesticides, which is called inorganic toxins, meaning like toxic rocks, inorganic toxins. Round 1 of pesticides had the really sketchy problem of how to kill the bugs without killing the people. So you could like sprinkle the arsenic around the broccoli, or like put it on the trunk and on the leaves and just hope it wouldn't get to the broccoli, or you could try to wash it off the broccoli. But you know, like wind and water made that pretty sketchy. Round number 2 of pesticide development was just squeezing the plant to get the toxins out. You all realize that plants have a lot of natural defenses, like that's what nicotine is. It's a way for tobacco plants not to get eaten by bugs. How many of you are aware of that? Like the psychoactive ingredient in cocaine, or the THC in the weeds, or garlic oil in garlic, or orange oil in oranges. Like that's all just to keep the bugs from eating them. So round 2 was what we call botanical pesticides, where you squeeze a plant that doesn't get bugs, and then you rub that stuff on your food. Again, kind of a lot of work, kind of messy. You don't want your broccoli to taste like garlic oil. You don't want to drink a whole bunch of nicotine either. So round number 3, this was the one that we make documentaries about. The 3rd round of pesticides, that was like the heyday of the American chemical industry, 3M and Dow, right after World War II. You might remember from the vocab the persistent organic pollutants, the POPs. Those were all right there, late 40s, 1950s, 1960s, early 1970s. These were the pesticides that you really got to worry about. Pesticides that last forever, they're persistent, because they're built on a carbon backbone, they're organic. And because they're built on a carbon backbone, this is how they poison you. I've got a really interesting fun fact about chemistry in the 1950s after World War II. Can anybody imagine in the late 1940s, early 1950s, when the American chemical manufacturers were expanding dramatically, where trained young people had kind of become harder to find because, you know, warfare? where might the United States be able to recruit people with a strong background in chemistry, deadly chemistry, toxic chemistry?
Nazis?
That's right. And so there's like a lot of really interesting, crazy history, conspiracy theories / investigative reporting about just exactly who we hired for those Dow and 3M pesticide production facilities. Imagine how sweet it would be if you're going out to the field and you see all these bugs eating all your broccoli, and you just like open up a jar and you put it in the sprayer and you spray all your stuff, and like all the bugs die, and then like tomorrow you come back and a bug lands and it dies. The fact that they were persistent made pesticides super effective. So people were spraying like crazy. The American economy had all this growth, so everything felt cheap. So you could just buy like truckloads of poison for nickel and dime. And of course people were paying crazy prices for food because our economy was exploding. So man, we used a lot of chemicals, and we're still dealing with those exact same chemicals today because they were persistent. Nowadays we have different methods. Number 4, nowadays we use a lot of biological controls. We use a lot of ecology. And we use IPM that I'm going to get to in a second here. But before I get to IPM, which is study goal number whatever comes next, IPM is number 12. Before I get to number 12, I'd like to take a little side trip. We don't have to talk about stuff you would necessarily put in your, oh no, there is one thing you'll have to put in your notes. But I just want to have like what I think is one of the most interesting conversations about environmental science that nobody has with you. Why do people eat organic food? Go ahead, what is the most common reason globally? Yeah.
Healthier.
Right. How many of you have heard that organic food is healthier? It is the #1 reason why Americans report eating organic food. And I want to be absolutely clear about something. Put down your cell phone, put down your pencil, get ready for something that you will never hear anywhere else except for Jose Caballero's class. There is no evidence to support that claim. Because you meant it's healthier for the consumer, right? My wife had cancer, and you would not believe how many people were stunned, like, oh my God, that's crazy, she eats organic, right? They're like, yes, I don't know. This conversation has so much detail and nuance, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. I really want you to hear the right thing. So first of all, pesticide causes cancer. Like, if this was pesticide, and I went glug, 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 on average, most pesticides are carcinogenic. Not all, but most. However, the amount of pesticide that reaches you in your food supply is way below any toxicity threshold. You all understand that things which are toxic doesn't really matter because enough of everything is toxic. You know that, right? You know that you can kill yourself with too much water? Other than drowning, I mean, you could literally drink too much water. anything is toxic if you have enough of it, and nothing is toxic if your dosage is low enough. Is that, you guys understand dosage, right?
Yeah.
So like heroin, you can all go home today, you can have 1/1000th of a gram of heroin and you'll be totally fine. Tell your doctor I said it's okay. Tell your mom, 1/1000th of a gram, you're okay. Don't worry about it. Okay. 0.80 is 1 gram of heroin, you'll be fine. You won't get high, it will not be bad for you, it will have no toxic effect. 0.80 out of 1 gram of heroin, you're fine. Likewise, the amount of pesticide that reaches you in your diet is, a lot of zeros and a 1. So I don't know the numbers, but it's way below. Because think about it, we have a global data set to answer this question. Don't you think that we have enough experiment running already? We can find entire countries where people mostly eat conventional food. And then we could compare their risk of cancer to people who eat just organic foods, and you would think that with that much data set, we would have found evidence by now, right? People have been looking for 60 years. There's no evidence that that's true. Eating organic is my favorite example of doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. When I tell my kids that there's no evidence that eating organic is healthier for you, the food consumer, they go, well, then why do you eat organic? And it's like so many reasons. For one thing, pesticides are ecologically devastating. You realize that, right? Killing bugs is bad. Remember we talked about like that whole part of the food chain, right? You understand that there's a lot of bugs in the magic of soil, and there's a lot of bugs between producers and everything uphill, right? So killing bugs is bad. And then of course pesticides travel from the bugs to other systems, like the birds I really like, and the other critters that I really like. And all pollution becomes water pollution, and I love water. I love the ocean, I like lakes and rivers, and I love fish. So yeah, pesticides really, really, really bad ecologically. And number 2, pesticide is really, really bad for farm workers. And I know a lot of people don't even see farm workers. But personally, I think providing food is like a sacred privilege. If somebody brings my food to me, I love that person, whoever that person is. I think feeding humanity is like the most righteous activity. So I care about farm workers. Like spiritually speaking, I think that they are the secret saints. And you know something else that pesticide is really bad for? It's bad for agricultural communities. You know who has to live out there? The poor. And we're not even giving those people health care, so I don't want to poison them on top of that. Because like, I just kind of care about all humans, and I wish that everybody could have like reasonable qualities of life. And I want to protect farm communities from those poisons. So yeah, pesticide matters. But you know the one reason that everybody eats pesticide? Because they're all like caring about themselves. They're like farm workers, whatever. They're like agricultural communities. I thought this all just came from like some other place with like people of different skin colors or something, right? They don't have communities. Everybody's just like, I want to stay healthy and perfect, and so I'll pay whatever for my food because I'm just in it for me. So every time I hear someone say that they eat organic because it's healthier, I tell them, totally do that. Because if I told them it's all the same for you, it's just better for other people, they'd be like, oh, well, screw it then. I'd rather people do the right thing for the wrong reason than not eat organic at all. Every year I do the same thing. The girls will tell you, I did this last year, right? Remember that last year I said the same thing? You don't even know what I'm talking about because you're all zoned out. Fine.
Remember.
Students who recognize what I just said will tell you I say this every year. And every year when I say this, I see the entire class go, yeah, but I think you're wrong. So go ahead, talk to me. This is an opportunity to get more worldly. Yeah?
What about the placebo effect?
Indisputable. Yeah, absolutely. If you think something's good for you, then you should keep doing it. What else? Come on, you can challenge me, ask me whatever you want. This matters. I might have made fun of your mom just now. Are you sure you don't want to stick up for her? Nobody cares about this conversation? You're over it? Yeah.
Couldn't you argue that the lack of pesticides in itself is healthy?
Here's as close as we can get to that with a scientific foundation. Okay, but I've had this conversation a trillion times. So, A, the systemic absence of pesticides is systemically good. So if we could lower the global volume of pesticides, then all of us would carry a smaller body burden of pesticides, and that might help us. It would certainly help specific areas that are drowning in pesticide, like farms, rivers downhill of farms, farm community, and farm workers. So yeah, you could argue that the absence of pesticides is good. But if you mean in me, the consumer, is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Well, here's what we know. The closest we can get to finding evidence of that is that people who are less chemically complex tend to be healthier. But conventional foods is not your main source of chemical complexity. It's not even top 5. So if you're worried about the net complexity of your organism, I can tell you you're onto something. You would function better. We would all function better if we were living like cavemen, right? We would all be healthier if our organism was fueled by simple foods and didn't have all these other inputs. That's true. But the amount you get from conventional foods is relatively minor compared to other risk factors that raise your chemical complexity far higher. Like living near combustion sources like houses and cars. Participating in processed foods. So like when you eat stuff in a wrapper, you're going to raise your chemical complexity more than when you eat a tomato, no matter how that tomato was grown. And of course, you and I lather our organism with all sorts of other chemical inputs, like wearing synthetic fibers, living in homes that have paints and plastics. We consume all sorts of pharmaceuticals and cosmetic products. And so if you're trying to keep your temple as pure as possible, cutting down on conventional food is like your 11th step. Maybe it's the only one you can avoid, so sure, it's better than nothing. I mean, I'd rather people eat organic for the wrong reasons anyhow, so I'm not going to talk you out of it. But as far as your health, like, there is really no significant reason to focus on conventional foods as part of that conversation. Like, cutting out the processed foods makes a way bigger difference for your chemical complexity, and pharmaceuticals and your environmental, mostly respiratory risks are way bigger. Yeah?
Oh, I just thought that you clarified, but I thought you were saying that food choice has no effect on, like, carcinogens. But then you clarified that processed does.
Absolutely, a far greater. And by the way, I only said cancer because that's the reason that people think of illness, but that's probably not the main problem anyhow. Yeah, internal damage in general Yeah.
I was gonna say, do you or your wife or anyone in your family think organic food tastes better?
Oh, absolutely, and that's indisputable. That's indisputable. There's all sorts of other benefits too. Like, I don't really have a say in how food is grown far away, but when I talk to my farmer homies, like, I can actually like rap with them about how they're managing their soil and stuff. And so like a lot of the food that reaches my table, like, I know the dirt where it's grown, the water they use, like that's great. I've got a lot of nitpicking and control freaking I can do. Separately, every time organic food will taste better pretty much across the board, all other things being equal. Because of this, please look up. Organic soil management has gazillions of ingredients that don't show up in an analysis of limiting factors. All the stuff that makes food complex flavors and complex smells, those are all micronutrients. So you'll never buy that in a bottle, but good soil has it anyway. Organic food tends on average to be grown closer to the consumer, so it tends on average to be picked closer to ripeness, so on average it tends to be more mature as a fruit, which usually makes it taste better. Because it spends less time refrigerated, it tends to be slightly more flavor. Anybody else? This becomes one of those weird times where you all took this class to find out how your life is actually going to be impacted by environmental science, and I'm trying to talk about it, and everybody's like, dude, can we just finish the study goals? So, like, are you sure you're done with this topic? Yeah.
So does washing your fruit matter at all?
Yes, but not for the reasons you think. The main reason you should always wash your fruits and vegetables is road dust, which is more of a health problem for you than any pesticide residues might be.
Why?
Brake pads and exhaust fumes, diesel. Yeah.
Is the claim that like living 3 miles from a freeway is like a major health reason true? 'Cause I've heard that about brake dust.
I don't want to say 3 miles in particular, but I can tell you for certain that living near sources of combustion, like what I told her, is bad for you, and we all do. Most of us live inside a source of combustion, and then we drive to our other sources of combustion inside of other sources of combustion.
You mean like gas combustion? Like burning wood?
Same problem.
Same problem.
It's just that wood has a lot less ingredients on average. There's a lot more imperfections to combustion for fossil fuels. So as a bigger threat, burning diesel is probably the worst of all these. In the US, burning diesel is probably the worst of all these. Actually, living near the harbor might be the worst. Your biggest air pollution source here is the shipping lane. That's the dirtiest air that you'll have access to living in this county. And of course, we all do. The lucky few live right on the coast, and then of course they're potentially the most exposed. What else? Yeah.
Just in general, like for home.
No, about this one topic about organics and pesticides. All right. So I'm done with that. I want to really quickly do number 12. The definition the book gave you is missing a couple of details. Okay. For number 12, I need someone to give me the definition of integrated pest management now, please. The one you got out of the book. There's something missing. Tell me what the book said. Integrated pest management, according to your book, number 12 is what?
Address pests below economic injury.
No. Yeah.
Mine says a pest management goal of control rather than complete elimination using methods of pesticides, biological controls, and planting patterns. Farmers can do less damage to water, soils, and ecosystems.
Yeah. So the key part I want to pick out. You want to reduce pest numbers without using pests. So IPM is defined in your book as biological controls, limited chemicals, and planting methods that I want to explain. I've got 4 options for you. Where it said planting methods, this is number 12, I'd like to add. They said biological controls. Looked at limited chemicals and planting methods like crop rotation. If you got broccoli bugs, grow some corn. Like irrigation timing and methods. So like if you provide the water differently. Airflow is shockingly important, like ventilation. And my favorite IPM tool is more bugs. Because most bugs is good bugs. My favorite tool is more bugs.
You mean like more like predatory bugs and
More all sorts of bugs, not just predatory bugs.
so like you
When you build the whole food web, the one bad bug usually gets squeezed in population sizes. Let me give you an explanation of what I mean when I say more bugs, because you're going to probably have to write something else in a second. If I've got 10,000 acres of nothing but barren soil and broccoli, what is the only food source on those acres? The broccoli. So what kind of bugs do you think I'm going to get? Broccoli bugs. Compare that to 10,000 acres that includes a variety of crops and a whole bunch of native habitat. Now I'm going to get a whole bunch of other bugs that eat other plants, a whole bunch of predators on those bugs, diseases between those bugs. Overall, that's going to bring down the broccoli bug populations better than the alternative. And I'm not even picky about which bugs. I'm not just saying ladybugs or praying mantises or predatory nematodes or whatever. Just more bugs. So a really hot trend in farming right now is, vocab term for you, insectary planting. Growing stuff that brings in more bugs. Insectary. Planting stuff that's just good for bugs. You know, on a lot of farms, there's a bunch of space that's not very useful. Like, you really can't grow stuff right along the road because of the road dust, and you can't grow stuff like right along the fences because the fences might be pressure treated, and you can't grow stuff too close to the power poles because of, like, I don't know why. So I don't know, just take all those edges and the places you can't get the rototiller and then just make all of those native habitat. And you get all these like good bugs. They're just kind of like a fence of protection around your field. All right. If we're done with number 12, then number 13 was fine in your book, and number 14 I really do want to talk about. Vocab that I hope you all know already. Does everybody realize that genetically modified crops are a type of genetically modified organism? So salmon is a GMO, not a GMC. Salmon's not a crop, it's an organism. GMO, not GMC. Riddle me this, Batman. everybody's freaking out about genetically modified crops and stuff, but haven't we been choosing genes all along when we were selective breeding? You should be able to answer that.
Yes.
Not really. Here's why, and there's a lot of stuff that you don't know about genes, and that's okay, and I wouldn't expect you to be a pro at this. Bio4C or Bio 200 or something. You go to college. When you go to UCS Pro, I mean. A lot of genes are connected to other genes, and a lot of genes are selected in chunks. So you can't really nitpick when you're breeding stuff. Also, when you're breeding stuff, you don't know what the genetic background is. You're just looking at a phenotype, the expression of genes. And you're selecting that phenotype. So like if I want to breed redhead humans, I'll just make sure that only the redheads get to make babies. But I don't really know what I'm doing at the genetic level. I just know what I'm doing at the redhead as a phenotype level. If that requires 36 genes that have a relationship with a bunch of other traits, like skin color, or average height, or production of other, I don't know what the hell redheads do. Yeah, their general soullessness. Then all of those genes would be associated. I'm not selecting genes one at a time specifically. I'm selecting the phenotype. Is that clear for everybody, the physical characteristic? So you need to understand something, and you may want to write this down. Genetic modification is explicitly transgenic manipulation. Like you take a little tiny piece of DNA and put it into other DNA. That's not breeding.
Wait, can you say that sentence?
You take a little tiny piece of DNA and you put it into another piece of DNA. Transgenic manipulation. So like, you make new combinations that are never possible. You know, selective breeding could theoretically happen in nature. It's possible that redheads might make a baby with another redhead. So sure, I'm selecting how many redheads I get in my gross example. But that was natural, possible. Like it is possible that short dogs would hump short dogs and the Chihuahua could happen in nature. That's a bad example, but anyway. You gotta realize that like no matter what you do, strawberries aren't gonna hump fish and make babies, but we do play with their genes like that. There's a fish in the Arctic Circle that can survive temperatures below freezing because it has like an antifreeze protein. So we spliced that DNA out of a fish, we inserted it in strawberries, and now we can grow strawberries in December. They don't freeze. Yeah. So the fish antifreeze gene. Or here's another one. We found this bacteria that's toxic to all bugs. So we cut out the DNA for the toxin, inserted that DNA in corn, and every cell of that corn is now pesticide. It doesn't hurt you. You can eat that bacteria. You eat it all the time. It's naturally occurring in all soil. So BT corn, this is vocab by the way, Bacillus thuringiensis, that was that bacteria that's toxic. It's in your vocab. Bacillus thuringiensis is a bacterium that's toxic to bugs, so we just cut out the gene for the toxin and we put it in corn. You know, we were growing like thousands of acres of BT corn, and people believe that it may have caused the extinction of a single migratory route of monarch butterflies, because they all flew over the corn and then they ate all the pollen off like the whatever they eat, and then they all fell and they died. 'Cause poison. Yeah.
You said BT is toxic to all bugs, right?
Yeah, I think so. They hit most bugs, I guess. Yeah.
What would be the effect on like decomposition?
Really good question. I don't know. Maybe they can't decompose at all. I don't think worms can decompose it, so I don't know. Something may be. I don't want to. It said all bugs, and then I took that back and said most bugs. But yeah, what if it didn't decompose? That's the right thing that you would assume if it was toxic to all bugs. Yeah. And so genetic modification is a totally different thing, just so you know. It's transgenic manipulation. You are taking a gene and doing stuff that isn't even remotely possible in nature, like fish don't hump strawberries. And everybody gets really nervous about it, but I gotta tell you, it's actually kind of sweet. Get ready to write notes for number 14. For number 14, there's some really cool stuff you can do with GMOs. Like, you can make plants that are more tough. Heat, cold, drought, pest, toxin, tolerant. You can make plants that survive all those things. Oh, here's a good one. There's an herbicide called Roundup that kills all plants, but we found a way to make plants immune to Roundup. So now there's Roundup Ready corn, and you can spray weed killer all over that field and all the weeds die, but the corn survives because it's toxin resistant. Yeah! Farmers don't have to weed anymore. Like, I tell you that, and you're like, oh, that sounds horrible. And you tell, like, every farmer in the world, they're like, we don't have to weed anymore. Roundup Ready. So the company sells you, like, huge containers of Roundup when they sell you the seeds for the corn. They're like, here you go, plant the corn, and then just spray Roundup on it, and you'll never get weeds. And for farmers, like, that's pretty sweet. Turns out that really sucks for bees. Losers. Here's something else that your book already said about GMOs. Your book already said higher nutritional value. Imagine if you could just like grow extra vitamins. Like a Flintstone vitamin in your rice. Or accelerated growth. The USDA just approved for human consumption a salmon species that grows about 6 times faster than the wild salmon. Think about the efficiency. Like, this fool is farming regular salmon. I'm going to farm one that gives me 6 generations before he gets to market. Accelerated growth. Like, oh, we just got 2 months of nice weather. We can still grow corn, no problem. Your book also talked about extending growing seasons, so you can push the tomato into Christmas time, or get your basil in February. But then there's the stuff that your book didn't say that I think is the really interesting stuff. I've got a couple of interesting ones. Here comes an interesting possibility. What about producing medication? There is some suggestion that plant cells should be able to produce almost anything. So bringing down the price of cancer medications. You know, like, a lot of the stuff you gotta keep cold, but what if I could just send the seeds to the Sudan and then they could grow their medicines instead of me having to ship medications in little temperature controlled containers? What if instead of remembering to take your birth control pill, you could just eat your favorite chocolate ice cream and it had birth control pill already grown in the chocolate? Sorry, was that a stereotype about girls with chocolate ice cream? That was a stereotype. That was a stereotype. Okay, fine, I'm sorry. Unintentional stereotyping. But that comes from somewhere, just saying. Okay. Next. What about animals that have human body parts? Animals that have human body parts.
That sounds very
So let's be really clear. You realize that like the closest heart valve to a human is the pig heart valve?
Yeah.
What if we could just dial a couple of genetic switches and have a straight up human heart in that pig? Imagine the irony. You ate too much bacon, so you need a new heart. So you get your revenge by taking the pig's heart. Y'all have no sense of humor. I can't believe it. I don't even know why I talk to you. Trash. Hey, I've got one more. This is real. Algae and bacteria that produce fossil fuels. Biodiesel algae and natural gas farting bacteria. By the way, there's even bacteria that fart hydrogen gas in a lab setting. If we could grow those industrially, hydrogen fuel cells made from free hydrogen, that's like a total energy future right there. You could like solve all kinds of human problems if you had a steady supply of free hydrogen. I don't know. I know that people get nervous about GMOs, but I also think it's kind of exciting. I don't know. It's like kind of a little of this and a little of that. Like I'm really excited, so I'm really scared, but it's really exciting, it's really scary. Should we talk about why they're scary? Hey, and then we can be done. Here's scary reason number one about genetically modified crops. The downside, the no, is number one, genetic contamination. Like, what if those genes travel to wild populations? We don't want to have all the stuff be toxic. Or all the stuff be antifreeze, or all the stuff be birth control. And genetic contamination turns out to be actually kind of difficult to control. Not just cross-pollination, but there's like retroviruses that steal little pieces of DNA and then spread them around. Number two, you know, we make a lot of crops that are controlled by the seed company, so they make non-viable seed. The Terminator gene, did we talk about the Terminator gene in this class? But here's a concern about genetically modified crops. You know, all over the world, most humans still grow their own food. So when we make seeds that are non-viable and put them out on the market, that threatens the food supply of the world's poor. And seed companies love that, but the world's poor don't love that. Yeah?
Would Terminator genes stop the cross-pollination issues of it spreading, genetic spread?
Well, keep in mind that Terminator genes would, but also Terminator genes don't spread because of the cross-pollination thing. There's the one example, though, that doesn't count. Cross-pollination is one thing. Genetic contamination is different. Retroviruses cut snippets, carry them in the virus, and then inject them later into other stuff. We can control the plain old pollen, sperm, and egg equivalent, but we cannot control retroviral activity. Genes do contaminate. You share like 26% of the genes with lettuce. Many of those are just plain old retrovirus get moved around. We all carry a whole bunch of useless genes. But God forbid we started to carry useless genes for bacillotoxin.
Yeah.
Number three, there's this thing about unintentional reactions. Do you all know that genes have multiple functions? Did they teach you that in biology for high school students or not? Here's the scary thing. What if the gene for red hair also, like, I don't know, made the thing that makes you allergic to peanuts or whatever?
Whoa.
No, really, like, there's a lot of concern that when we manipulate food, we might get unintended allergic reactions, unintended interactions with medication that we don't know about, because genes have many functions. I selected the antifreeze from the fish and put it in the strawberry, but that might trigger your gluten or